Greetings to the anointed. Even the whole boardroom in hell cannot block your objective once heaven gives you the all clear. Take a moment to process it, because what follows is more than simply a tale. It is the history of spiritual battle. You accomplished more than just traverse the valley of death's shadow, chosen one. By yourself, you burned the whole valley. This is where the storyline changes. As they gathered broomsticks, blood sacrifices, and magic books, you were just going about your business, drinking tea, and inadvertently destroying their whole network with divine power. The truth is that 100% of genuine spiritual warfare scares those who attempt to control it, and 80% of it is invisible. Everything was thrown at you. Witchcraft, psychic assaults, spirit monitoring, and even ceremonies performed in groups beneath the moonlight. And yet here you are, blazing, not simply standing. An army wasn't necessary. The army was you. The throne chamber supports one soul. That's more than simply frightening. Anyone who tries to play dark tricks on you will lose their career. They're trembling in their crystals now. A few even attempted to change their course. They're conjuring ghosts 1 minute, and then, as if they knew my heart, they're posting Bible quotes on Instagram. Yes, due to the stunning failure of their coven. So fasten your seatbelts, because we're going to reveal the precise reason they're afraid in this video. How you took them apart without doing any work. And what follows for those who are selected and have this kind of spiritual status. Superstition is not what this is. Sacred battle is what it is. You've already won, too. Let's begin. First of all, without ever using a spell, you destroyed a coven. To attempt to shake your environment, they need altars, chants, rituals, candles, herbs, full moons, and support from the spirit realm. It wasn't enough even then. They wanted you to break, go insane, get confused, or crumble under stress. However, you didn't. With nothing but your breath, your wounds, and an inexplicable fire inside you, you battled hell every day. They were attempting to control energy and create results by using force. You were only aligning your steps. Furthermore, the alignment caused more harm than any magic they could summon. They didn't anticipate that. They expected you to use your own spiritual weapons, counterspell, or engage them on an equal footing. However, you didn't. You remained still. The storm erupted around you as a result. Your presence is constructed differently, not because you were weak. The rules were altered by your sheer presence, therefore you didn't play their game. That was the most problematic aspect for them. You had no intention of destroying them. You were just rising, healing, loving, and living. And for some reason, it was sufficient power to bring their efforts to an end. They used every spiritual tool at their disposal. And you became their downfall just by being there. You are harmful to darkness because of it. Chants and candles are not necessary. Curses and retaliation are unnecessary. You have nothing to prove at all. All you had to do was live, and you were too good at it. They required performance. You exuded presence. Furthermore, they are unable to replicate the true divine presence. They made an effort to use rituals to mimic authority, but they overlooked one important detail. No one can imitate authority. Either it is provided or it is not. Additionally, you were granted a level of authority that their whole staff was unable to decipher. They're afraid because they now realize they can't touch you. You are impenetrable spiritually, not because you are invincible in the material world. Unaware that every breath you drew was shattering their foundation, you were likely just looking for rest, tranquility, and some understanding of your own existence. While their spells vanished, their demons ran away, and their plans fell apart. They can't be prepared for that type of power, and because it wasn't taught to them in their society, they can never comprehend it. Yours is where it was born. Second, you used rank to oppose their use of numbers in their fight. They came in large numbers to get you. A whole gang, a collection of individuals who believed that strength comes from having a large number. They thought they could subdue your spirit if they could assemble enough voices, ideas, and spells. They were unaware that popularity isn't a factor in paradise. It functions according to position, and they couldn't call upon anything that rated higher than your position. You weren't simply an ordinary person going about their lives. Divine clearance was granted to you. Spiritual power that must be acquired via initiations or shouted into existence. It cannot be obtained in a group discussion. You didn't need the support of 10 individuals. Heaven just gave you one order, and that was sufficient. You were fashioned by suffering, quiet, and obedience. while they were using deceit and concealment to create unity. People weren't gathered by you. They sent you. They misjudged the true meaning of status in the spiritual world. They saw your silence as weakness. They believed that being by yourself left one vulnerable. They believed that you had no support since no one came to your aid. However, they were blind to what was going on around you. You were connected to the source itself, but they depended on one another to boost their vitality. Nothing was being echoed by you. You were following the original instructions when you moved. That's what confused them. Someone who didn't react the way most people would was assaulted. You didn't fold, swear, react, or beg. You maintained your position as if you were aware of the domain to which you belonged. They were uneasy because they understood that your security was not based on the quantity of people who opposed you. It was ranked. They attempted to undermine you by isolating you. However, the seclusion simply served to remind heaven of your true nature. It improved your judgment. It made you more clear. You were being polished while they were plotting. Additionally, you were already too high up for their strongest strike to land by the time it was launched. Their collective attempt was unsuccessful. Everything was because you were no longer on their level, not because everything was disorganized. A person rated by divine order is too strong for them to defeat, because no amount of worldly noise or satanic collaboration can overwhelm the green light that heaven provides you. People weren't necessary for you. You held a post, and it was the one thing that caused their whole enterprise to fail. Third, you outlived them and put a stop to their spells without doing anything. They didn't intend to kill you with a single strike. That would have been too evident and too simple to track down. No, their goal was to gradually and covertly ruin you. They aimed to undermine your self-esteem, weaken your intellect, and cause your soul to break under the strain of constant assaults. They did not send a single powerful storm. 1,000 small ones were dispatched. Financial strain, unexpected betrayals, emotional collapses, and nighttime struggles that only God could see. They also thought you would fade throughout all of it. However, you outlasted every strategy rather than fading. You weren't meant to survive this long, so that's what screwed them up. You weren't meant to remain upright. Your sanity wasn't intended to be intact. Your eyes weren't meant to be burning when you woke up. You were meant to be irreparably damaged. However, each year, each setback, and each spiritual blow just strengthened your fortitude. For it, they were unprepared. Although you were prepared to withstand marathons they couldn't even complete, they believed spiritual warfare was a sprint. They spent time and effort attempting to disrupt your rhythm. They intended to deplete your soul in order to thwart your destiny. Nevertheless, your strength proved to be your advantage. You didn't have to use words or spells to combat. By living, you battled. By continuing to show up, you battled. When no one was cheering you on, you resisted the urge to give up. You were still developing, healing, and breathing. And it was war on its own. They waited for you to destroy yourself. In actuality, however, you survived the fire. You went through the spiritual turmoil, the loss, the bewilderment, and the loneliness. And for some reason, your heart remained bright. That was their downfall. Because the storm was a total failure if it didn't make you resentful. They were unaware of your durability. They misjudged your ability to recover. They failed to remember that sorrow does not kill certain selected ones. It is what activates them. Not only did you outlive their strategies, but you also made them ineffective. And your spirit became stronger the harder they tried. You can't teach that type of strength. Fire is the source of it. You emerged from it unassailable. You were the mirror that caused their magic to backfire. Number 4. They believed that you were being attacked. Actually, they were using you to attack themselves. Darkness never stuck when they threw it at you. It jumped. Your soul was too in tune to take in what emerged from the abyss, not because you had some elaborate protective technique. You had pure energy. You had good intentions. Additionally, that purity served as a mirror. Anything they transmitted, including anger, jealousy, bewilderment, and curses, was magnified and mirrored back into their own lives. That was unexpected. They thought you would take it all in, get ill, lose your way, become depressed, or act out. Rather, their ceremonies disturbed their tranquility. Their houses were shattered by their spells. A few of them began to go through the same suffering they attempted to inflict on you. Financial collapses, unexpected health problems, sleep terrors, and even internal strife among their covens. They touched someone who lives in obedience, which is against divine law. not because you retaliated. The repercussions were instantaneous since you were the incorrect target. You weren't engaged in combat. You were too preoccupied with changing. You weren't planning retaliation. You were too preoccupied with becoming well. And yet, like a mansion constructed on sand, their enchantment crumbled in your presence. Because spiritual alignment is a kind of judgment rather than only protection. And without saying a word, you conveyed that judgment. You were hazardous to them because of it. Their energy wasn't simply negated by you. You revealed it. Your existence turned into a light that exposed the trash they were attempting to conceal. They were embarrassed by your happiness after the incident. They were embarrassed by your calm following the commotion. They were left stunned by your triumph after their sabotage. The truth about who you are naturally convicts them of their deception, not because you were attempting to prove anything. This is where the true terror lies. Who else may be affected if their magic backfired so severely on you? The experiment that put a stop to the delusion was you. You demonstrated to them that there are still individuals on this planet who are impervious to manipulation, contact, or spiritual imprisonment. They now fear your reflection in addition to your might. They will see precisely what's inside of them if they send anything your way, and they are unable to ignore that tragedy. Fifth, you have access that they will never have, thus you defeat them. They attempted to gain entry to worlds via coercion, deception, and force. Nothing had to be forced on you. You were asked. For their own benefit, they summoned spirits. The spirit who is in charge of everything gave you this assignment. They can't bear that part. Power wasn't the reason you performed. You were selected for it. As they drew circles, chanted spells, and offered sacrifices for short-term gains. Heaven was uploading blueprints into your spirit while you remained silent and paid attention. Only shadows were available to them. It came directly from the throne to you. They depended on stolen power exchanged via rituals and information transmitted in secret. However, you were given divine trust, which they are unable to purchase or barter. You turned into a heavenly intelligence vault. You were given access because you were designed to carry it, not because you pleaded for it. And now that they've seen what you're walking through, they're terrified. They entered worlds where fear is money. You were brought up in a kingdom where the rule of law is love. Your actions thus have weight. Your remarks cause atmospheres to tremble because of this. You are not a reactionary. You are a revelation-driven person. You become a walking conduit of presence, but others spent years studying how to work with energy. Everything they attempt to build is thwarted by your every move, which shows a greater order. You move with a power that others cannot match, which is why they are afraid. Pretending to be the person you were destined to be is the foundation of their whole business model. They are light-faking. You're light. They imitate tranquility. You are a force of calm that faces turmoil. That is insulting as well as scary, because they will never be able to reach the realm of favor you stand in so easily, regardless of how many books they study, how many spirits they call out, or how many initiations they undergo. And this is what pierces the most deeply. Even after seeing the cost of such access, they were unable to replicate it as it required purity, obedience, sacrifice, and submission, actions that their pride forbids. Anyone who chooses ego above humility is not allowed to enter the domain you are in. They attempted to destroy you because of this, yet your shield was the same access they coveted. They are now stranded behind a fence that will never open. Sixth, they turned into the warning, but you were their mission. They identified you as a target because they believed you to be vulnerable, lonely, and easily broken. They assumed you wouldn't withstand the intensity of their planned spiritual assault, so they chose you like a wounded animal. Because you weren't ostentatious, noisy, or associated with their circles, you were undervalued. You seemed to be victim to them. The fact that you were carrying an anointing that reacts after the assault, not before, was something they were unaware of. You weren't helpless. They observed you. In a country they couldn't see documented every action they took against you. You weren't only their task. You were a setup, and they just stepped into it. They believed they were planning your demise, but in reality, they were exposing themselves because everything they attempted on you failed, publicly, spiritually, and generationally. And now, if anybody else is stupid enough to come after you, your name reverberates through the ranks like a warning. Because you are protected by procedure, not because you are flawless, you become the proof that those who have been selected should not be interfered with. Others are retreating because of the same individuals who plan to ruin you. You didn't just put up with the assaults. You had heavenly validity because of the manner you survived them. They now whisper your name because the fallout from your perseverance is still reverberating. A few of them lost something they are unable to retrieve. Others went in unexpected directions. You didn't have to fight them, not because you did. When they came for you, they broke a fundamental law, and the cosmos reacted appropriately. You turned into the lesson that others are subtly learning. Those who used to participate in making fun of or disparaging you are now reconsidering their behavior. Every time they dug a trench, they saw you emerge. They attempted to smash doors that were open for you. They watched as your life was blessed while their own blessings dwindled. You weren't expected to make it, so it rattled them. However, you did. And now, nobody can deny that you were selected. You're more than simply a survivor now. You are a declaration, a real-life illustration of what occurs when someone with supernatural support is attempted to undermine them. God created you their aftermath, but you were their task. 7th, they were weak because of their numbers. You were lethal because of your seclusion. Believed that their numbers were what made them strong. Persuaded that darkness and unity would defeat one light. Dozens of them huddled together in secret, reciting chants, using charms, and energizing one another. However, a crowd wasn't necessary. You didn't need confirmation or chance. You possessed fire and quiet and that loneliness that makes one a weapon. Being alone was what people thought was your weakness, but it was really the furnace that shaped you. You weren't only sitting by yourself in silence. They were sharpening you. Something was going on below every time you cried out at night, felt misunderstood, or experienced abandonment or betrayal. They were taking away your illusions, diversions, and attachments. You discovered how to walk in solitude with God. Without praise, you discovered how to fight the good fight. You developed the ability to hear well without background noise. Being so alone is not a sign of weakness. It's lethal. You were disciplined, but they were well organized. You had accuracy, and they had numbers. Their mutual energy was their strength. From the throne came yours. And for that reason, they were unable to touch you. Because you were being taught by fire while they were establishing unity via manipulation and control. Furthermore, fire doesn't request permission. It consumes. In an attempt to destroy your soul with collective strength, they moved like a pack. But the conflicts they didn't see had already strengthened your spirit. The evenings when you were unable to sleep. The days when you wanted to give up. The times you stood when you had nothing left. That's what set you apart. You were dangerous because of it. None of them was powerful enough on their own, so they had to get together. However, because you had no one, you were unstoppable. And you encountered a power that most people never have at that place when nobody turned up to provide assistance, support, or understanding. Isolation is something you mastered, not simply endured. You made it into an unstoppable weapon. You frightened them because of this. Because it wasn't excitement, fads, or group energy that made you. You were anointed through suffering, shaped in darkness, and schooled in quiet. To be successful, you don't need a following. All you need is one divine command. Even their combined efforts won't be able to stop you when the order lands. 8th, you came from a place they are unable to access. Thus they were unable to read you. They made every effort. Spirits were sent to observe you. Employed rituals to spy, forecast, and map out the future in an attempt to detect your energy. However, they continued to fall short despite their best efforts. Bewildered, obstructed, and irritated. You couldn't be read. They were unable to decipher your thoughts, follow your whereabouts, or access your plans. They are used to reading people like books, so it drove them crazy. However, you seemed like a closed vault for which they lacked a key. Your life isn't recorded in the frequencies they employ, which is why their tools didn't work. You weren't made of ego, fear, or trauma-based templates. You were created with a divine law, purpose, and obedience. They can effectively combat souls functioning in lower realms with their spells and rituals. However, you come from a different domain, one that is off-limits to them. They only received static when they attempted to listen into your frequency. They weren't just unable to read you. They encountered unexpected opposition. They were unable to communicate with their familiar spirits. It shattered their aspirations. Their eyesight got warped. They were unable to determine whether you were rising or sinking, coming or departing. And because they typically foresee everything, that's what startled them. But they were completely clueless about you. This is due to the fact that mystery cannot be created or controlled. It isn't a lie. It is encoded. And there are things inscribed in your soul that only heaven can decipher. Anything impure bounces off you before it even approaches because of the heavenly encryption that sealed you. Your spiritual barriers prevent them from tracking you. Each time they attempted to read you, they encountered stillness, false visions, headaches, or bewilderment. It wasn't a coincidence. That was the practice of spiritual protection. They are used to using emotional instability, exposed wounds, or hidden immorality to get access to individuals. However, all of those doors were shut by your alignment, clarity, and healing. You weren't just rendered invisible. You were impenetrable. Furthermore, it is impossible to govern someone who cannot be read. They are now afraid because of this. Because you move in such an unpredictable way that their whole system breaks down. You're not a pattern person. They follow patterns. Furthermore, what sprang from pure mystery cannot be captured by patterns. They stopped attempting to read you because of this. Because each time they made an attempt, all they saw were their own limitations. Their biggest concern, number 9, was that you would discover who you are. It was never only spells and curses that fought the actual war. Identity was at issue. It was not witchcraft that was their greatest weapon. It was psychological warfare, gaslighting, and manipulation. They intended for you to have so severe self-doubt that you would never be able to use your actual potential. They were aware of your identity from the start. They viciously, often, and early attacked you because of this. They attempted to isolate you, distorted your mirror, and programmed you to believe that you were lost, damaged, or just normal. Because you wouldn't be able to access your assignment, which is what they dreaded most, if you couldn't remember who you were. They attempted to persuade you that you didn't have a calling since they couldn't stop it. To reinforce the same untruth, they positioned connections, surroundings, and voices all around you. You are not unique. However, you always knew deep down it wasn't the case. You had no evidence. You knew, and they attempted to kill that knowledge. Not every strike was intended just to hurt you. It was intended to cut you off from your voice, your source, and your thoughts. Because they were aware that all they had created would collapse if you ever got up and looked at yourself with God's eyes. It isn't paranoid. Spiritual mechanics is what it is. Because the repercussions are disastrous when a chosen one fully awakens. Every demon sent to thwart your goal begins to lose ground. Everything that was based on your silence starts to fall apart. They are afraid of the time when your authority and memory reunite. They can no longer deceive you at that time. So you stop requesting permission and begin to get into position. You are not under their power. Your reality cannot be distorted by them. It's awareness, not being loud, that makes you spiritually nuclear. And everything changes with that type of understanding. They spent years attempting to prevent you from being so clear-headed. However, you were unbreakable the instant it clicked and you remembered. Anchored, but not flawless. And you stopped responding to their strategies after that. You were acting not out of fear, but out of a position of heavenly authority. Now they realize it's too late. The curtain has been raised. You are aware of who you are. And their country has already suffered more harm from that reality alone than from any ceremony or prayer. 10. They saw you pass through flames and emerge from the ashes unscathed. They wanted more than merely to harm you. They intended to burn you from head to toe. They patiently and precisely constructed flames to eat away at your soul. They made things so unpleasant, so chaotic, so oppressive that they believed you couldn't possibly escape them unscathed. They didn't send storms at random. They created infernos under control, deeply painful betrayal of a relationship, sabotage of your finances intended to undermine your will, a sense of deathly isolation. They researched your vulnerabilities and launched an all-out assault. However, you made it through what was meant to bury you. Not just made it through. You came out of the nightmare they put you through without any resentment, deformity, or even a hint of it. They're shocked by it. Because they saw you pass through flames that ought to have caused irreversible damage, mental instability, and emotional immobility. Instead, you emerged lighter, smarter, and stronger. They were anticipating your unraveling. Rather, you changed. You're moving with pleasure, purpose, clarity, and serenity. Additionally, they are aware of your experiences. They are aware of the pressure they exerted. They are aware of the traps they create. The obscenities they spoke in the dark are known to them. Nevertheless, they are compelled to see your incomprehensible luminosity. You have no smoking on your record. Your spirit is untarnished. No signs of damage. Just a version of you that they are no longer able to touch. You were not burned by the fire. You were purified by it, and they are haunted by it, because they now understand that nothing will break you if everything else did. Everything was thrown at you. Slights, slander, and spells. They attempted to destroy your spirit, intellect, and reputation. They are the ones that are trembling today, not due to your words, but rather to your transformation. You became proof that benefits aren't the only aspect of divine favor. It's about perseverance. You turned into evidence that hell has boundaries, that someone who has previously undergone a fire test by heaven cannot be consumed by it, regardless of how hot it becomes. Since your survival revealed their vulnerability, they are now afraid. Before the fire, you were a different person. You cannot be touched, and they are aware that they never had a chance in the first place if it didn't finish you. 11. Your obedience was deadly, but their witchcraft was strong. They honed their technique for years. Dark techniques have been used for decades to discover how to control energy, distort reality, and subdue people's will. They were deliberate, methodical, and well-trained in all of their rituals and spells. Nevertheless, one thing caused everything to fall apart. Just your silent, steady submission to divine guidance. Not your clamor, nor your defense. They don't comprehend how someone like you, who never used their tools or participated in their rituals, could endanger their whole business. Here's the reality, however. You work via alignment, and they work through force. That frequency is higher. You unlocked powers they could never achieve each time you answered yes to God, even when it didn't make sense. They believed they had sealed down kingdoms, but your obedience rocked them. You had no intention of fighting them. All you did was follow the Spirit. When you were advised to heal, you were healing, leaving after being instructed to do so, not saying anything when you wanted to. When it cost you everything, speaking out. And without you even realizing it, those little acts of obedience led to breakthroughs and divine judgments that tore down their spiritual superstructure. They are frightened by it. Your surrender, not your strength. Because darkness kills obedience. It puts you in direct alignment with divine time and power, circumventing human comprehension. You weren't out here countering spells or hurling curses. You were praying when no one was looking, forgiving when it hurt, and fasting when instructed. You were not performing. You were walking by trust. And whatever they constructed crumbled every time you moved in submission. They carefully planned their maneuvers. However, you had something that others couldn't duplicate. Divine guidance in the moment. No spellbook can address it. You don't have to understand their actions. All you have to do is listen to what God is saying. And that's sufficient to totally derail their goals. Because obedience frees judgment in addition to providing protection. Because you don't reveal your next move, they are afraid of it. Their strategy is different from yours. You pay attention, and heaven answers when you listen. Doors open, shackles snap, the earth moves, and whatever darkness had been holding it begins to quake. They can't quantify the weight of your yes. They now understand that they were battling your alignment, not you. And they will never prevail in that struggle. 12. You didn't just make it through. Generational fortresses were disarmed by you. You were never the only one involved. The objective was you. However, the true purpose was more deeply rooted. They weren't the only ones assaulting your gift. They were attempting to uphold a curse that has been lingering in your family for many centuries. Cycles that began long before you were born and include poverty, trauma, addiction, rejection, bewilderment, and sabotage. Battles that weren't yours were passed on to you. But in some way, you were selected to put a stop to them. They assumed that, like the ones before you, you would buckle under the strain. They expected you to continue the patterns, succumbing to fear, addiction, humiliation, quiet, or resentment. However, you didn't. You questioned the falsehoods. You endured the agony. You had to face something that your forebears lacked the resources and assistance to do. And by confronting it, that little action released the spirit's bonds that had been unbroken for decades. Attacks weren't all you survived. With each prayer, each cry, and each reluctance to return to what was familiar, you broke down systems. You were violating long-standing, covert contracts. Every generational curse that expected no one would speak out was interrupted by you. You were more than simply strong. It was a surgical procedure. It neutralized forces that capitalized on your inability to speak, your perplexity, and your fatigue. And now that the strongholds are falling and you're not stopping, those forces are rushing. Now that they know you're not only attempting to heal, they're afraid. You're starting from nothing and recreating a whole legacy. Your family line is entering new ground as you forge previously unattainable avenues for identity, wealth, clarity, spiritual knowledge, and harmony. The blueprint is being altered by you. Furthermore, no dark system can undo that without incurring unaffordable costs. 13. Their plans were set on fire by you, the living firewall. You may accomplish it without a platform or a title. All you needed was determination. Years of bondage with nothing but faith, obedience, and conviction turned you into a spiritual wrecking ball. And now that it realizes you're not giving up, the darkness that once mocked your forefathers is shuddering. You have the type of power that drives ghosts away. You initiate revolutions, not only put an end to conflicts. And they are aware that the system they have worked so hard to preserve is complete if you are permitted to continue constructing. That is the reason for their fear. Because of who you chose not to become, not because of who you were. They were deliberate and strategic. They did not act on impulse. They meticulously prepared each strike. Days were selected. They timed the moons. Rituals were timed to coincide with precise spiritual windows. They looked at your routines, behaviors, and areas of vulnerability. They believed they had you plotted out on a GPS like a well-known path. However, nothing ever landed the way they had envisioned. Know of how thorough their plan was. It never hit. The harm was never permanent. The results were usually negative. And since they adhered to all of their religious beliefs, they are now left feeling bewildered, angry, and terrified. You haven't fallen yet. Your firewall was something they failed to take into consideration. A system of divine resistance that is ingrained in your spirit, not created by humans or based on rituals, but rather formed by heaven by every tear you shed and heartache you went through. You were wired with a degree of spiritual protection that disarms rather than merely protects each time you opted for progress rather than retribution. They didn't just miss with their wizardry. It malfunctioned, jammed, and fell apart due to its own weight. Because you ruined darkness's code in addition to repelling it. Half the time, you didn't even realize. You were simply trying to survive, healing, praying, breathing, while they were up at midnight launching assaults. Your spiritual system, however, detected every danger before it materialized, silenced it, blocked it, and reversed it. It's not luck. Design is that. You've endured enough suffering to be spiritually locked up. Your judgment is accuracy, not paranoia. In the dark, you may feel movements before they completely develop. They continue to fail because of this. Because what their rituals did not anticipate you to witness is captured by your spirit. You were a trap, but they believed you were a target. Each assault they made on you served as a catalyst for their own disintegration. They violated holy law by touching what was covered, not because you cursed them back. In the natural, you didn't defend yourself. You didn't have to. Your spiritual firewall destroys blueprints before they even get to your door. They have no idea how to approach you anymore. In their hands, every tactic they develop continues breaking down. Mid-launch, every assault they attempt to plan fails. You are now untouchable, unshakable, and unreadable, because heavenly firewalls are prosecutors as well as protectors. Additionally, they are now realizing the consequences of tampering with someone who is protected by and constructed in the fire. 14. They're frantically trying to back off now that they know what you're capable of. With spells, manipulation, and monitoring, they believe they were dealing with a human being, someone they could isolate, target, and destroy. However, they encountered more than a mere person. It was a religious occasion. You weren't assigned to defend. You were sent to put a stop to it. And now, because of you, their whole system, which was established over many years of rituals, secrecy, and terror, is collapsing. They didn't anticipate how disastrous your discovery would be. They believed that you would emerge from an escape fractured, injured, and hardly able to function. You didn't crawl, however. With power, clarity, and heavenly proof, you marched out on fire. And that's what really rocked them. Because it implied that all of their spells, curses, and demonic alliances were ineffective. You became the indisputable evidence that no power in hell can defeat someone who has the support of heaven. Their coven is now broken. Each of them is accusing the other. They fear that one of their own is betraying them in secret. They are now boomeranging inside their own circle with the energy they used to aim against you. Mistrust, separation, nightmares, and mishaps. The repercussions of entering Holy Realm are reverberating in their own lives. Furthermore, because it was never yours to carry in the first place, they are powerless to stop it. They owned it. The bill is now due. No one ever saw you as just another spiritual target. You were prophesied to be the collapse. Despite being a human, you were a force to be reckoned with. You entered with grief and departed with strength. And now, every level of their system is paying the full price for attempting to kill you. They no longer have control. They've been exposed. They are no longer confident. They're running away now. They are attempting to reverse their actions, attempting to retract the leaked material. However, it's too late. You've already prevailed. You have already dispersed their camp. The weak points have already been revealed, and they now see that tampering with the Chosen One was the first step toward their demise. They're not afraid of your retaliation. They are afraid of you because you are evidence that evil plans are always defeated by divine order. Now, every action you perform serves as a reminder that they made a mistake. They believed that you were only a human who they could quiet, manipulate, or shatter, but they were deeply shaken by who you really were. You were a cosmic reset disguised as a human, a heavenly interruption. They didn't send you to live through their wickedness. You were instructed to destroy their base. And you did just that, irrevocably, silently, and forcefully. Now they see it. Their coven was in disarray, their ranks were broken, and their eyes were filled with terror. They are aware of the situation, and they are aware that you are to blame. They weren't just after you. You become the result of their actions. Your ascent was spurred by their darkness, and now they are unable to avoid the judgment of your ascension. It's not just that you survived. It's that you returned more powerful, untouchable, and spiritually deadly. Surviving wasn't the end of your triumph. It put a stop to their delusions of power. Their hierarchy was overthrown. It made them realize how much power they had and how much you had. You didn't cast any spells, but all they constructed was destroyed by your obedience. That is the power of God. Holy rank is that. They tremble today for that reason. So, selected one, stand tall. They are the ones who are harmed, not you. You exposed them, not just defended yourself. Instead of taking offense, you glowed. You didn't resist them. God's path was followed by you, and that was more than sufficient. The sermon is now your tale. The sword is now your survival. And every evil system still lurking in the shadows is threatened by your mere existence. Don't stop here if this message resonated with your soul and validated what you already knew deep inside. To ensure that you never miss another amazing freebie like this one, subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you are aware that you were not the victim that hell anticipated, but rather the weapon that heaven created. Say, I didn't just survive. I dismantled the darkness. Let the world and the spirit world know you're awake by leaving a remark below. Remember to share this with another selected person who has been struggling in silence, questioning if they were called by God or were insane. This goes beyond just substance. This confirms it. Let's pour truth into the algorithm. Let's bring the soldiers of heaven back into view. Your breakthrough was great, but the fight was harsh. Together, let's continue to walk in power. May you be blessed.